Hello, everyone. And please, guys, tell us where you're all from. Um, and guys, we are going to run this webinar a little bit like we run the webinars in our online program. So, if you talk through the chat box, Emma and I will both keep our eye on the chat box. But please keep your audio muted so we don't hear anyone's dogs or TVs in the background. Um, but please, we do see a few lovely faces, and we do love to see your faces because it helps Emma and I to connect with you. And we are absolutely a judgment-free zone. So we don't care if your hair's not done or if you're in your pajamas or anything like that. So if you're feeling brave, we'd love to see your faces. Guys, for people who don't know me, my name's Glenn Mackintosh. I'm a psychologist. I'm the clinical director at the Weight Management Psychology Clinic, and I'm the creator of the Transformation Support Community online program. And in both of those capacities, I know Emma pretty closely. So yeah, I'm pleased to welcome my close colleague and collaborator and friend, Emma Furner, who's going to help us to understand the power of yoga psychology, which is, if you don't know much about it now, you'll know a lot more about it in about an hour's time. I won't keep you too long because I know that Emma has a lot to cover with you. But by way of introduction, Emma is one of our senior psychologists at the clinic, and I will embarrass her by saying that her clients absolutely love her. She's also a trauma-sensitive yoga teacher, which she will let you know all about. And she's also our resident deeper work expert in our transformation support community program. So last year, Emma debuted a live deeper work series called the Deeper Work Knowing Yourself. And that was something that our online community members absolutely loved. And because of that, we're back doing another series, which Emma will also let you know about. And I couldn't not say that I also found that series personally very beneficial. It helped me get to some things that a lot of psychology and a lot of personal development couldn't quite get to. So I'm very thankful to Emma for that. And I'm going to come back and do this entire series with everyone as a participant. So I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Guys, hello, Farhana from Kuwait. That's fantastic. We'd love to hear where everyone else is from too, guys. Before I hand over to Emma, Emma has just this wonderfully calm and kind and authentic nature, which our clients love and our online community members love. And really all of us on the team love. So I'm sure that you're gonna love it too. So I'll hand you over to Emma.
Thank you, Glenn. So I would like to say that I'm feeling very calm right now, but I notice my anxiety peaking a little. So let me just take a moment. Perhaps you might want to take a moment where we can settle into this space. So I invite you to take a few breaths, as I myself will. Maybe some shoulder rolls. Maybe some head movements, just coming into your body, into your breath, and into this space. And beautiful, my anxiety's gone. So welcome everyone. It is really good to have you here tonight, and really lovely to see familiar faces and new faces. And, let's just start with, I guess, for yourselves, acknowledging what it took to get here tonight. So, You know, 7 p.m. is not the easiest time, especially if you've got children at home. So just inviting you to honor what it took to get here. And, you know, that breath, if I invite you to come back to that breath and just let that be a bridge that carries you from the day that's gone to then the night or the space that we're creating here together. And in this space, what I hope to do is a few things. So I hope to provide you enough information about this upcoming series, perhaps even stir some inspiration to become part of it. But more than that, my hope is that tonight you'll also come away with something of value. So perhaps that's a deeper understanding of what yoga is, the power of its practices, or maybe even a deeper understanding of us humans, yourselves, myself. Okay, so here's the plan. I'm going to now share my screen, so just bear with me. And how's that? Can everyone see my screen? Beautiful. Okay, so here is the plan. So tonight's aim, so firstly, I'm hoping to give a background into myself, how I came to be running this series, as well as the series itself. We're going to get into what yoga is, what yoga psychology is, you know, the very name of our webinar tonight. And then we're going to go through what the aims of the series are, which aspects of yoga we're going to be practicing and why. We're then going to get into a bit more nitty-gritty around how we're going to be spending our time across the 14 weeks, which is how long the series goes for. And then we're going to look at what the benefits are that you might experience in you know, having a relationship with yoga or the practices that are within that. And then we'll finish off with any questions. So that is the plan. Okay, let's now get into the background. Okay, and so I can't help but smile when I see this photo. It just feels like so long ago, but yet just like yesterday. And so what you're seeing here is me back in the 2000s when I found myself traveling to India to study yoga. So at the time, I didn't know much about yoga, only that I liked practicing it. And my practice as well at that time was pretty limited to a VHS. And I didn't even realize at the time that the place that I was heading, Rishikesh, was considered the birthplace of yoga. And I certainly didn't plan on becoming a yoga teacher. It just happened to be the cheaper option, can you believe it or not? So there I am at the foothills of the Himalayas, immersed in study, practice, working my way through a teacher training course that I seriously thought I would never use. And look, meanwhile, humming in the background was the question of what I was going to do next. So at this point, I'd finished my psychology degree, I'd worked a little in the field, and I had moved to China to teach English. So I was saying, no, I don't want to be a psychologist. I'm going to try and figure out what it is I do want to do. And so I wasn't even sure that I was going to go back to Australia, let alone to pursue my registration as a psychologist. But fast forward 6 months, so there I am in this teacher trainings course. Fast forward the 6 months, and I'm back home in Australia, and my passion for psychology had reignited, along with a very clear idea of how I was going to use it. And what's important to note here, so the whole reason that I'm telling you this is that it didn't feel like a decision. Instead, it felt like something I can only really describe as a deep knowing. So it wasn't something that I reasoned through mentally. I didn't write a list of the pros and cons. It was just something that I felt, something I sensed. It was like a little gentle or not so gentle inner nudge. And honestly, I put this down to yoga, which is hard to explain, and it may sound somewhat cliche what I'm about to say, but it was almost like the more that I met myself on that yoga mat, the more I actually met myself. And in doing so, what arose was just this knowing, which is something that, you yourselves may be familiar with. Perhaps you've experienced that yourself, or maybe it's something that you will become familiar with. So there I am, eventually both a registered psychologist and a qualified yoga teacher back here in Australia. But the story doesn't end there. So here's the thing. So whilst I was living in both those worlds, whilst I was registered in both, while I was doing both, I kept them very separate and for a very, very long time. And it was almost like myself was split. And, really what was in the split here, the gap, the chasm, was fear. So I really feared that if people knew that I was both a psychologist and a yoga teacher, I'd be looked at as not professional enough, not scientific enough, that I was doing something wrong. So back then, there wasn't the evidence base that there is now for yoga, and psychology is all about evidence base. So it was this sense that I was doing something wrong. I had the fear, on the other end, that I would be talked or thought about as too woo-woo, or perhaps not woo enough. That, another fear that I didn't look or sound like a yoga teacher, or, that I wasn't honoring the cultural origins or the depth of yoga. And whilst I'd like to say that all of these fears were unfounded, some of them weren't. So, early on in my career as a registered psychologist, I was explicitly told that I couldn't be both. That to let others know that I was a yoga teacher or offer that as a service would, in quotation, confuse the public, especially in the small remote town that I was practicing in. And look, given the fears that I'd already had, I just took this as final. So I think my older self might now, be doing something and saying something differently to that. At that point, it was final. But over time, what really happened was these fears lessened more and more. And it was through lots of reflection, practice, and inner work that I eventually overcame this split within myself. So bringing those two worlds together. But it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of encouragement from people like Glenn, who see the value of psychology or the value of yoga in the field of psychology and of being both. But again, why I'm telling you this is because I believe that at the heart of it was also yoga itself that helped me integrate these aspects, that helped me heal the split. Because the more I studied, the more I practiced, the more I taught yoga, and the more I lived it, I could see just how much confusion exists and still exists about what yoga truly is. And I began to see that me offering psychology and yoga alongside one another, that may have actually been helpful to clarify the confusion in the first place, rather than add to it, which was the concern of, the Australian Psychological Society and the concern that I then had. Because what I've really come to realize is that these two systems aren't that separate at all. So most people, when they think of yoga, they think postures. Maybe they think breathing, maybe meditation, And while that is absolutely part of it, it's certainly not the whole picture, because yoga in itself is a complete system for inner transformation and remembering our true nature. And so much of what we now consider evidence-based, this is quite interesting, you know, particularly in the realm of trauma, regulation, somatic healing, it actually has its roots in ancient yogic teachings. So a lot of what Western psychology does, especially the more contemporary approaches, you know, they do have a direct link to, you know, what yoga has taught and known all along. So now I no longer see yoga and psychology as opposing paths. I do humbly walk both, and I believe that they're both systems that are incredibly supportive and transformative in their own right. And so my last series, The Deeper Work, Knowing Yourself, that was heavily based on Western psychology, guiding us to know ourselves more deeply through those frameworks. And so how this series came to be was that, you know, we did the lens of the Western psychology, knowing ourselves, and this series, it shares the same aims, but it's now rooted in yoga. And it's more about experiencing ourselves more deeply. So that's how, you know, I came to be here, how, you know, this series came to be. And, you know, by this stage, I've probably said, you know, yoga, the term or word yoga 20 times by now. So let's then get into what yoga actually is. Okay, okay, next slide. Okay. So as I've mentioned, you know, yoga is a very vast and deeply transformative system in and of its own right. And honestly, there is nothing that I could say in, you know, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 60 hours, even 60 days that's going to touch the sides and capture the depth of what yoga really is. So today I'm just going to offer a few key ideas to help us understand it a little more clearly. So first, the word yoga comes from Sanskrit, which is an ancient language from the Indian subcontinent. And the word means to yoke or to unite. And, you know, yoke was one of these things that, so if you think about a horse and a cart or an ox and a cart, the yoke would be whether it's metal or wood, the thing that joins the ox and the cart. I've got it back to front. And, you know, so two separate entities, then uniting, becoming a whole entity. And so what is it in yoga that we're uniting? So we're uniting our breath, our body, our mind, our emotions, and our spirit, both the individual and the universal. And when we think about, you know, yoga being to yoke or to unite, it's really kind of little wonder that it was, you know, that I believed really helped me overcome my own habit of keeping those parts separate or compartmentalized. That it was through the practice itself that, you know, psychology and yoga and my, you know, feet in both camps came to be more whole. Second, yoga's roots are ancient. So we're talking, you know, something that stretches back thousands of years to what we now know as India and Pakistan. And just like Western psychology developed through various theorists, schools, cultures, yoga too has become shaped by many lineages, many practitioners, gurus, sacred texts, and cultures. So we've got the ancient then meeting the modern. And so then we've got different styles, different variations, different paths of yoga. But it really is ancient, dating back to sacred texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, you know, said to be dating back 2,000, 3,000 years. Third, there isn't just one path of yoga. So traditionally, there are several classical paths, including the path of action and selfless service. So that's called karma yoga. Then there's the path of devotion, or what they call bhakti yoga. And so whenever I think of the path of devotion, what comes to mind are, you know, the modern Hare Krishna movement, where you'll see people chanting in community, in robes, and that's really about, you know, devotion to Krishna. And then we've got Jnana Yoga, which is the path of inquiry and wisdom. And so those sacred texts that I mentioned, you know, that would be, you know, reading them, applying them, you know, applying them to what you observe in others, yourselves, the universe. So the sacred texts, and then, you know, the self-inquiry. And then we've got Raja Yoga, which is the path of meditation and mental discipline. And, you know, this is often referred to as the eightfold path because there's 8 set out elements, which I won't go into, but yeah, really, really interesting. But within those elements, I will say, is Hatha Yoga. And that's the yoga that, you know, here in the West, we most commonly know. So that's the physical practices. That's, you know, the pranayama, the breath work, and the meditation. So, you know, I hope that then makes a little more sense in terms of the different paths of yoga, and then where those physical postures fit in. Because they are absolutely part of yoga, they're just not the whole picture. The other point I want to mention here, which is a really important point for tonight's webinar in the series, is that yoga has its own psychology. In fact, many scholars and longtime practitioners, they actually describe yoga as a comprehensive system of psychological and spiritual development. One that offers a rich understanding of the mind, the self, and a path to freedom. And look, you know, this was centuries before modern psychology ever emerged. And when I mentioned briefly the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, so that's a lot about the mind, its workings, and how we can overcome, you know, the mind that then creates suffering. Okay. And finally, at its core, yoga is about integrating all aspects of the self. It's about realizing and reconnecting to our true nature, our Atmayana, and ultimately moving toward liberation from suffering, which in Sanskrit is moksha. And all of this, you know, all of this, I say, you know, I like to sum it up by a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is translated, but that yoga is the journey of the self through the self, to the self. And so I'll just repeat that yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self. A verse that has many dimensions, you know, and as I talk about it now, I'm reminded of the fact that I had this quote on the wall in one of my past offices where I would see this daily. And what it meant to me back then, it means something entirely different to me now. And I share that because if you haven't grasped anything I've shared or haven't grasped everything I've shared, please, please, please do not let that be a deterrent to continuing. Because yoga not only helps us evolve, it truly evolves with us. Because when I first read this quote, I didn't actually see the connection to Western psychology, which, you know, makes me, you know, chuckle lovingly at myself now to think, how could I not see that? But I didn't. Where what I really see now is like that's describing Western psychology as well, where both systems, you know, are about helping us understanding ourselves, helping us heal, helping us grow. And so this connection to me is now really clear that yoga and Western psychology are simply two different doors that can lead us into the same room. That room being the room of our truest self. So yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self. And so let's zoom in a little further on yoga psychology, because I think, you know, it's incredibly insightful in its own right, and it blows my mind to think that it dates centuries back. So not only is it like incredibly insightful in its own right, but it's also the framework for our series. And at the heart of yoga psychology is what's known as the Kosha model. And so this model originated, like I said, you know, centuries ago in an ancient text called the Taittiriya Upanishad. And this model really describes the layers of our being in a way that is just so relevant today, as you might, you know, see. So the word kosha, so again, a Sanskrit word, and it means sheath or layer. And in this model, there are 5 koshas, or 5 layers of being. And these layers surround and veil the self. So, you know, in my mind, the way that I think about this is likening it to babushka dolls, the Russian nesting dolls, where, you know, we might start with the one doll that, you know, we can then peel off the top, open the top, and then there's, you know, another doll within. So another layer. We can then break that one apart, another layer. And we keep going until we get to the doll that is whole, that doesn't break apart, that is completely whole. And so the kosha model is similar to that, in that we've got these layers upon layers upon layers, and then we've got the whole, the self. And these layers, they really range from the physical and tangible to the most subtle and spacious. Each one, you know, like the dolls, can be experienced on its own, and each one offers us a pathway back to who we truly are. And in the upcoming series, we're going to explore these layers in more depth. But for now, I just want to give you a brief overview of each of them. So the first layer is the Annamaya Kosha, and that's the physical body. So Anna means food in Sanskrit. So it's the body that's made up of food. So the skin, the cells, the tissues, muscles, nerve, bones. It's the most tangible experience of us being alive. And in our modern world, I think that's the one that we as a society most identify with. And actually today I heard, you know, two people describe the physical body or the energy body, which I'll get to, as our hardware. So it's our hardware. In Western psychology, this layer might align most with the somatic layer. So the body is the site of memory, sensation, movement. And so this is the layer that somatic psychotherapists, body-oriented therapists tend to work with. It's also the layer that, you know, the medical and allied health fraternity generally deal with the most. Then we've got the second layer, the Pranamaya Kosha, which is the energy body. So this is the layer of prana. So prana is the vital life force that animates us. And so sometimes people refer to the prana as the breath because we can change it through the breath, but it's energy that moves with and through it. So it isn't the breath itself, but the energy within. And so if we think about the physical body as hardware, this body is like the energy that runs that hardware. And Western psychology doesn't speak so much in terms of prana, but it might, you know, we could loosely relate it to the autonomic nervous system, you know, where the breath is often used to upregulate, downregulate the nervous system. So that's the second kosha. Then we've got the third, which is the Manamaya Kosha, the mental and emotional body. So this is the domain of thoughts, emotions, memories, conditioned responses, how we perceive and filter and react to the world around us. So this kosha aligns most closely out of all of them with psychological therapy, so with Western psychology, where, you know, a lot of us tend to work on cognitive patterns, emotions, attachment styles, core beliefs. So that's the mental and emotional body. And then we've got the Vignamaya Kosha, the wisdom body. So this is the layer of insight, intuition, discernment, higher knowing. So it's the part of us that can observe the mind, can reflect on our experience, and can make choices that are aligned with our deeper truth. So this is the part that I truly believe I was accessing when I found myself going to do a yoga teacher trainer's course, when I found myself going back to Australia to finish my registration as a psychologist. You know, that it wasn't a cognitive, the mental or the emotional, it was just a knowing. And one that, you know, has been such a wonderful path for, you know, my whole life. So I believe that that's the one that I was tapping into. And in Western psychology, we can, you know, there's room for this wisdom body, which is often seen as meta-awareness or observing ego. So the capacity to notice thoughts, emotions, and experiences with clarity without necessarily getting entangled in them. And then we come to the fifth and final kosha, which is the bliss body. So Ananda means bliss. So this is the subtlest sheath that gives us that sense of bliss, that felt sense of peace, ease, connection to something greater. And it's not bliss in the everyday sense, but it's that quiet, spacious kind of contentment. And Western psychology, it doesn't often speak in these terms, but when we look to transpersonal and existential frameworks, it comes close. So when we think peak experiences, flow states, presence, awe, that deep sense of balance and centeredness. So they're the sheaths. And now at the center of all of those sheaths, beneath every layer, is what yoga calls the self, or the Atman. And so that this isn't the small self that we strive to improve, but that pure, unchanging awareness that underlies every experience. That's often described as pure awareness itself. And, you know, if I then bring Western psychology into this, you know, sometimes we do refer to it as the true self, the core self, the authentic self. But yoga kind of takes it beyond that. But, you know, whatever language, you know, the message is similar, that beneath all of our symptoms, our stories, there is a deeper presence, a steady, quiet place that remains whole, that remains untouched by what we've done, what we haven't done, or what's been done to us. And so the Kosha model, as I said, blows my mind for many reasons, but, you know, it is just such a deep, rich, and beautiful model that really reminds us that no layer is wrong, bad, or something to transcend. That each and every one of them is part of being human. Each layer offers its own wisdom, and each layer is deserving of care and has specific ways to take care of it. And, you know, what I also love about this model is that it really, at the center as well, is that healing isn't about just fixing the mind or calming the body, that it's really about coming home to all of ourselves, all of those parts of us. And so that's you know, like the framework that the series has been built on. But, you know, we don't just stop at the theoretical. So yoga does not stop at the understanding. It invites us to explore these layers directly. And so that's what we're going to be doing in the upcoming series. So we're going to be moving beyond thinking into feeling, sensing, simply being, and maybe even that pure awareness, that spaciousness. And so if we were to access our mental, emotional layer at this point in time, it might ask, well, how the hell are we going to do this? So how are we going to explore, experience, and connect with these koshas? You know, that mental, emotional body might even be, you know, holding with a sense of skepticism, saying, not going to happen. But there are actually a number of ways that yoga points us to in terms of exploring, experiencing, and connecting with these koshas. But we're going to talk about two, the two that we're going to be using in the series. And that's Yoga Nidra and Hatha Yoga. So Yoga Nidra. So Yoga Nidra has been said to be developed specifically to help us experience the koshas and ultimately our deepest, truest self. It's often called the yogic sleep, which is that state of profound relaxation and inner stillness. So where we're deeply rested, yet we're fully awake and aware. So think, you know, ancient sages or rishis who may be sitting there meditating, eyes closed, appearing to be in a completely different world. And I mean, who knows, maybe they are, but they're also very present and aware of, you know, the external world and what's going on around them. So even to down like perhaps each leaf rustling in the tree. And in Western frameworks, we've got room for this state, and it's called the hypnagogic state, which is, you know, it's just that in Western frameworks, we think of that space between waking and sleeping. And neuroscientific research confirms this, where the practice of yoga nidra actually activates similar brain waves to deep sleep, but while maintaining conscious awareness. And I first encountered yoga nidra in my training in India, and it's almost like, yeah, it was yesterday, because I remember how deeply rested. In fact, I thought that I had like a 2-hour nap or something, that I was deeply rested, but yet I was fully awake and alive. And yeah, just incredible. And then in 2018, so that was kind of a practice that I did there. I didn't, you know, continue to practice that or think too much about it. But then in 2018, I was working with veterans at the time, and heard about this protocol, which was I Rest Yoga Nidra. And so this protocol was developed by a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, who's also a yoga scholar. And he adapted yoga nidra for specifically PTSD, and developed a protocol for that, which has, you know, like great evidence-based, and is now being used in different for different presentations. And so I trained in that. And whilst we're not using the IRS Yoga Nidra protocol, you know, we are using elements of it. So we're using what's called an inner resource, which I'll get to later. But I just want to mention that, because whilst we're not doing the protocol, it will have very likely influenced me in how we're doing this, as have the traditional teachings from my first teacher trainers, because there are actually a number of different ways or different styles of yoga nidra, but we're going to be blending the two, contemporary and ancient. And look, there's so much to love about yoga nidra. So, you know, I love that it's got this evidence base. You know, it really appeals to that earlier fear that I mentioned. But the other thing I love about it is how simple and accessible it is. So yoga nidra is practiced lying down or in a position that allows you to deeply rest. So, you know, gone are the days, or I say gone are the days, but only recently I went on a holiday and meditated in this way, where it is cross-legged, where, you know, you can feel yourself slouching as the time goes by, and then having to jolt back up. So we're not going to be doing that. So it's all about coming to your most relaxed position. And then what happens is we're going to gently guide you inward layer by layer. There's no effort, there's no striving. It is purely trying to get your position or get your body in a way that's going to relax. So that's one of the practices. And that's kind of the main practice. And I'm talking about it first, but in each session, we're going to be doing it after we do Hatha yoga. And Hatha yoga is the other core practice. So it's the branch, like I said earlier, that's most associated with the physical postures, or asanas in Sanskrit, and breath work, pranayama. And in this series, we're going to use it as it was traditionally intended. And how it was traditionally intended to prepare the body, to regulate the nervous system, to quiet the mind. It was intended to really just create the internal conditions, preparing us for deeper self-exploration. And so that's why, you know, in the West, you know, if we go to a yoga class that's mainly the physical postures, at the end is always Shavasana, or the dead body pose. And, you know, that's then the whole class is preparing us for that deep rest, for that self-exploration. And so in terms of the Hatha yoga we're going to be using, it's really gentle, accessible, adaptable. So either laying down or seated. So we're not going to be doing standing. And you're going to be always invited to move in a way that honors your body and feels safe and nourishing. So this series, it's really been designed in a way that doesn't require too much of you. So last series, that required a fair bit. You know, that was quite a workbook. This one, it's like a swinging pendulum. It's going to be probably the smallest workbook you've had if you're a regular in the TSC. But so the aim is it doesn't require much of you. So, and you don't need to be flexible. You don't need to be spiritual. You don't need any prior experience. All you really need is a little curiosity, a willingness to explore, and 1 hour a week. That is more than enough. Because, you know, we live in a world that asks a lot of us already. This is going to be a space that asks you just to rest and drop in. So let's then get a little clearer. I mean, it probably already is fairly clear at this stage about the series aims, but let's drill down into it and make it, you know, crystal clear. So what this series aims to do is similar, like I said, to the last one, where we're going to be creating a safe and supportive space where you can come to know yourself more deeply. And to take it to that next level, you know, it's going to be experiencing yourself more deeply. As a whole, living, feeling, sensing, and, you know, perhaps even blissful and pure consciousness being. So more specifically, the program is designed to, you know, cultivate that deeper sense of self-awareness, explore and experience the many layers of your being. So the physical, energetic, emotional, mental, intuitive. Support your nervous system. Yeah, so that hardware, which is one of my dear clients called it today. And then we're going to deepen your relationship with your body. So not just the flesh and the bones, but you might even start to see your body, if you don't already, as an aspect of your humanness, even a portal to something greater. And we're going to offer gentle, accessible tools. So everything we do, you'll be able to do on your own or through the recording if you wish to. That, you know, that's something that you can then have a tool that's going to reconnect you with yourself, your inner world. And then the ultimate, yeah, to support you in accessing your true nature, your deeper self. And so what's this journey going to look like? Okay. So, you know, as I said, so the last series that asked quite a bit, and that was fairly, well, very heavy in theory. This one, not so much. First session, we are going to go into some theory and framework. But that's really only because the mind often feels safer when it understands the path ahead. So we're going to start by exploring what yoga is, the Kosha model, and how we're going to be accessing these different layers. We're also going to establish an inner resource. So as I mentioned with the Iris Yoga Nidra protocol, that's a real part of it. And what that is really establishing a felt sense of steadiness and safety that we can keep coming back to if anything gets distressing. And then we're also going to be, or I'm going to guide you to access your Sankalpa. And your Sankalpa is really your heartfelt desire or your intention. So that's going to be the first and second series. And then week by week, sessions, I should say, not series. That might be wow, to do a whole series on that. No, session. And then week by week, we're going to explore each kosha, so each layer of the self, and we're going to do this across 2 sessions. So, for example, we're going to start with the physical body, the Ananda Maya, the Anamaya kosha, where we're going to go through what that kosha is, so a little bit of theory, but then experiential, so the yoga nidra, so the hatha yoga, the yoga nidra, all around the physical body. And then the next session, so session 4 in this case, we'll revisit that. So no theory, straight into the experience of hatha yoga and yoga nidra relating specifically to the physical body. And then the next session, energy body. So that will then be over 5 and 6 in the same kind of format. So then we'll be going through each kosha layer by layer, gently, softly. Then in session 13, we'll start to begin to glimpse, maybe rest in the self. So the true you, your essential nature. So the part that is whole, that babushka doll, that even though the babushka doll might be that small, the one that's whole, it's much vaster and larger, our human whole self. And then session 14, that's really about letting the work settle, letting the self lead. So we're going to be focusing on integration and reflection. So we're going to be doing a gentle closing circle to honor the journey that we've had, to honor what's been uncovered, what's been felt, and also what we hope to carry forward. So that's what the journey looks like. Okay, so in doing this work, so in sensing, exploring, remembering the deeper self, going through the layers, you might find a whole range of benefits just naturally arise. Like I've mentioned throughout, all those benefits that I have experienced from yoga that at the time I didn't expect. I wasn't entering the practice thinking that that's what was going to happen, or even thinking that that was, likely to happen. But there can be absolutely lots of benefits. And look, earlier I mentioned that I had that fear about me being not professional or scientific enough, which is a fear that is no longer there, right? Because what's happened over these 20 years is that researchers have started to invest in researching yoga, the benefits and the different practices. So there is a lot of evidence base now that really speaks to these benefits. And while hatha yoga and yoga nidra are often they're often studied separately, Here are some of the most consistent and well-supported findings across both. So, deep physical relaxation and release of muscular tension, reduction in stress, anxiety, depression, improved sleep and relief from insomnia. So yoga is being used specifically for insomnia. There's different protocols. Support for symptoms of depression and PTSD. Like I mentioned, Iris Yoga Nidra, has a great protocol for that. Relief from chronic pain and somatic distress. Increased emotional awareness and resilience. Other benefits like enhanced interoception, so the ability to sense your inner world. Improved self-regulation, ability to manage stress. Greater clarity and insight into life's challenges. Growing sense of harmony, balance, ease. Other benefits like that deeper connection to meaning, purpose, and joy. Moments of stillness, presence, spiritual insight. And a steadier sense of self. That quiet center within, always there. So while this series is anchored in the deeper work of becoming intimate with yourself, there may be many, many other benefits on the way. Some that you might be hoping for, and like I said with myself, others that might be completely unexpected. But whatever arises, shifts, or softens, the practice will meet you. And what it reveals, I have faith, will be just right for you right now. So if this has touched something in you guys, whether that's a curiosity, a yearning, I warmly invite you to join us for the full series. So over 14 weeks, we'll move gently, layer by layer, into a quieter, true experience of ourselves that's going to be guided by ancient wisdom of yoga. And, guided as well by the power of your own bodies, your own sheets and koshas and the breath. And so I'm not sure of what the time is, but I'm hanging around for any questions that you may have. But if I just did look at the time and notice that it's 8 o'clock, so if you do feel you need to shoot off, then please feel free to do so. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope that whatever tonight has brought up for you, or whether it has inspired you to do more yoga, whether that's with us in the series or not. I just hope that you've got something out of tonight's webinar. And yeah, please feel free to ask any questions as I stop my screen sharing.
And guys, thank you so much for that, Emma. That was a beautiful presentation. And guys, Emma will be around to answer your questions. I was writing a few little notes in the chat, but then I was writing some of my own notes. I had an interesting realization based on a conversation I had with a friend last Sunday. And he said something to me that didn't quite click until your words spoke to me, and I thought, that's helped that click for me. So it was a really good example of how these ideas evolve with us. And guys, what I'm going to do is, just before we get to Emma's questions, I just will let you know a little bit about the practicalities of joining the series, and you'll get used to me if you are a member of the TSC. I can see a few TSCers in here, because I always have to check that it's okay that you can see my slides. Are we all good?
Yes.
Yep. Beautiful. So I think Mr. Nick, who actually facilitates our online program, say g'day, Nick. He has linked you to the link if you want to join the series. And as Emma said, I think that we've run a bunch of series in the TSC, and I have a feeling that this will be one of our most profound. And as Emma said, actually one of the easiest in terms of what we're looking to complete. So in the series, there will be the 14 live webinars that you can watch live. This is the time. So they're going to be 7 p.m. On a Wednesday, Australian Eastern Standard Time, or the wonderful Mr. Nick. He stays up late on those Wednesdays and puts them in your program. So they're a couple of hours after we record them. They're all up for you to watch in your own time. One of the very cool things I think about our series is that, as well as the webinars, you actually have Emma for the 14 weeks in our closed Facebook group. So you can access her with any reflections or any questions that you have that whole time. And there is a pretty significant, although much, much less significant than the last series workbook. I think it's about 66 pages at the moment. We did promise you a special little gift, which is the whole workbook up to session 1. I have the real benefit, it's like kind of like cheating, of editing all of Emma's workbooks. And I actually find that just the process of reading them thoroughly, I find really inspirational and really therapeutic. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of the little free gift, which is the whole workbook up to session 1. And it is really, I think, a lot of what we have covered today in written form. And then obviously after that, we get to the practices. But it's about, I think it's 20 pages long. And so it's almost a third of the workbook. And it really does sort of set that framework for understanding the Kosha model and how yoga, nidra and hatha yoga can be used to help you to connect with yourself. So I hope that that you really enjoy that. And I will let you know just a little bit about the online community that you join to become a part of the challenge. Because when you're joining this very special the series, when you join, we've just done a challenge in the TSC. When you're joining this series, you're actually joining a really, really special community that's been going on in this form for 5 years. A lot of people are really and just surprised and impressed by the special little community that we've formed. And I believe that it's a big part of the therapy. Now, there is probably too much, and I'm aware that we want to get to Emma's questions, but there is probably too much to mention about the transformation support community because there are just so many different ways that we support you. But a couple of key things are that we have that Facebook group that I mentioned, which will have Emma for the 14 weeks. But it actually has Courtney, who's pictured, who's a registered dietitian, and Grayson, who is another registered psychologist in the group there to support you, as well as all of your wonderful fellow members who will provide half of the therapy for you. It's just so wonderful to have everyone in there being able to post and comment and to support each other so beautifully. You also do have access to all of our other historical webinar series. So you can see some of the topics up here. You can see there's a little Emma Furner in the top left corner. So you have access to all of everything we've done previously, including Emma's original series. I have a feeling that a lot of people will do this current series and then go back and do your first series in their own time, Emma. But I think we've got about like 14 or 15 live recorded webinar series in there. So there's a real treasure trove that you can delve into whenever you want to or you need to. And then we do have a series of audio programs. So this is just one of our the transformational hypnotherapy program. I'm a hypnotherapist, so our members like a lot of my hypnotherapy programs. My favorite audio program is actually Emma Furner's body scans. Emma has a series of 3 really beautiful, relaxing body scans. So there really is just a whole lot there for you guys. And so the series, I think Mr. Nick has linked you to it. We're going to go from the next 14 weeks, starting September the 8th. We always do like to keep the support for the online community really intimate. So we always limit new members, and we have 16 new member places remaining as of right now. Last year, Emma's series did sell out. So if you want to secure your spot, the way you do it is by registering now. But we have learned through our experience that people who are just joining for a particular series, they don't like to pay for the membership until the series starts. So we do have a 21-day free trial that allows you to kind of find your feet in the program, and you sort of don't have to pay anything until the series starts. That 21-day trial will run out tomorrow. So if you want to jump on that, then please do. There's also an introductory member price. So when you get on the page, there's a little coupon code. Please make sure you enter that, because that'll mean that you get those special rates for as long as you're ever. And Liz says, how many months is the series? So we're basically going for 14 weeks, Liz. And what that'll mean is, what most people do is you'll probably end up signing up for 4 months. So your membership now will take you probably into, if you do the free trial, into probably the second week, sometime around then. And so you could probably potentially, it's probably going to take you for 4 months. What we often find is we do a lot of 14-week series, and if you stick in for the 4 months, which is 16 weeks, then you have a bit of time to catch up, tie up loose ends, and that sort of thing. So good question. Couple of other questions that we get regularly is, do you have to attend the webinars live? You totally don't. Most of our people just actually end up watching in their own time. But if this time suits you, we'd love to have you. So it's totally up to you how you watch. But if you miss a webinar, you don't fall behind. Every series we do in the TSC is very life friendly, so it makes room for if you've got to move house, or if some relatives come, or you're not well for a few weeks, you can always catch up. And I think this series kind of lends itself to catching up pretty well. And we always sort of let people know that we want to welcome you into this series. And a lot of people we find get into the TSC, as we lovingly call it, and they find a bit of a home there. They might stick around for 2, 3, 4 years, and they just keep transforming. But if you find out that it's a certain thing is not for you, or you want to finish up, you're not locked into anything. It's just a simple sort of month-to-month subscription. So guys, I will now, and I did see in the chat box there were a few questions. So if anyone has any questions for Emma about yoga psychology, or for me about anything else, then please let us have it, guys.
So I did see 2 questions in there that seem to be related to Buddhism.
Yeah.
So one was, how does Buddhism fit into yoga? So I'm not a cross Buddhist philosophy, but what I do know is that the Buddha was in India, grew up in India as a royal prince. And so if we think about the ancient texts that, he may have been exposed to, that that yoga is based upon, there's going to be similarities. So in Buddhism, there is, you know, mindfulness and meditation. So that is a big part of it. And, you know, there could even be, I'm not quite sure about this, you know, their own way of doing the physical practices. So there are some similarities, but they're also quite different. So I hope that answers that question. But the other question related to mala beads in Buddhism. And so similarly, because they're part of both traditions. So in the yoga tradition, mala beads, you know, might then support the mantra meditation. So you're then able to keep count of that, which I believe is similar in the Buddhist tradition. And because both of these, you know, really, and I'm a terrible historian and geographer, so please, if someone, you know, sees this and knows better, you can absolutely correct me. But my understanding is that it's then both coming from the what we now know as the Indian subcontinent. So there's going to be similarities, but yoga in of itself is a philosophy in of its own, as is then Buddhism. Does that make sense? Any other questions, guys? So you're most welcome. Amanda says thank you. And face-to-face sessions. Absolutely. So I'm in Brisbane. So I guess that would depend on where you are, Amanda. But yeah, just reach out to the team at Weight Management Psychology and then we can organize that. Any other questions, guys?
And it appears that that there haven't been too many questions. So I'm going to take that, Emma, as you have just explained everything so beautifully. And yes, Mr. Nick, if you could maybe link the our psychologist page on the weight management psychology website. So it is a sort of an interesting thing that happens when people do Emma's series, that some of them want to see her as a one-on-one client. So like she said, you can just let the guys at the clinic know, and they can talk to you about organizing that as well. And that can be, you know, sometimes I think there are so many benefits of doing a series like this. There are so many benefits of seeing somebody one-on-one, and sometimes that dovetails really nicely as well. Emma, is there anything else that you would like to say, or any other little thoughts that you have, or we're good to go?
No, thank you all for being here.
I'd like to echo that. Thanks to everyone for being here and taking the time, as Emma said. And thank you, Emma, for so generously sharing your time with us. We have gone a little bit over time, which does sometimes happen in our online program as well. So we'll be real with you that does sometimes happen too.
I'm so sorry.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.